Welcome to Moonnest, where stories wrap around you like a warm blanket. I'm happy you're here. Tonight, let your worries fade as we step softly into a world made just for dreaming. Stay close, there's more warmth and wonder still to come. In the quiet village of Renbrook, twilight lingered long after the sun dipped behind the hills, casting the cobbled streets in hues of silver and blue. Atop the tallest hill, hidden always in mist, stood a single lantern. Its light burned gently, steady and unyielding, casting its glow over rooftops and winding paths. No villager could recall a time before its light. It had always been there, flickering softly against the evening fog. Stories grew around it, whispered from parent to child. Some spoke of a keeper, hidden from sight, who tended the flame with careful hands and watchful eyes. Others claimed the lantern burned with the light of distant stars, collected by magic long forgotten. But these were only tales, spun to pass quiet hours. No one had seen the keeper, nor had anyone climbed the hill in living memory. It was on an evening thick with fog that a traveler came to Renbrook. Her name was Eloan, and she moved through the winding streets with a cloak of midnight blue clasped at her throat. Her steps were light, and her gaze was steady, as though she searched for something hidden in shadow. Mist clung to her boots as she walked, whispering around her ankles like threads of silk. Eloan paused at the edge of the village, her eyes lifting to the hill where the lantern burned. Its light shimmered in the fog, steady and soft, calling to her like a memory half remembered. Without a word, she turned from the cobbled streets and began her ascent, each step drawing her deeper into the thickening mist. The path was narrow and winding, lined with stones slick with moss, shadowed by trees whose branches seemed to whisper as she passed. The fog grew heavier the higher she climbed, swirling around her in waves, muffling the sound of her footsteps. Yet the light above her never wavered, it flickered silver and gold, steady and certain, guiding her forward. She did not know what she would find at the top of the hill, only that she must reach the light. And so she climbed, breath curling in soft plumes, the mist parting just enough for her to see the stones beneath her feet. The path twisted onward, steeper with each step. Trees with knotted trunks leaned over the trail, their branches stretching above like clasped fingers. Fog clung to the roots, spilling over the edges of the path like slow-moving water. Eloan walked with careful steps, eyes fixed on the light that shimmered above her, always just beyond reach. The silence deepened, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind that stirred the branches. She paused once, turning back to look at the village far below, its rooftops mere glimmers beneath the swirling mist. It felt like another world, separate and distant, untouched by the light that beckoned her forward. Eloan pulled her cloak tighter, the air growing colder as she ascended. Her breath came in soft clouds, vanishing into the fog as soon as it left her lips. She pressed on, her hands brushing the rough bark of trees that lined the path. Some were carved with symbols she did not recognize, spirals and crescents, woven together in patterns that seemed to shift when she looked too closely. At last, the path leveled out, and Eloan found herself standing before the lantern itself. It hung from a wrought iron post, dark and weathered, its surface etched with symbols that glimmered faintly under the light. The flame inside the glass was steady and bright, burning with a silver hue that flickered softly in the mist. She stepped closer, breath catching as she raised a hand to touch the iron post. The light flared gently as her fingers brushed the surface, casting long shadows across the stones. Eloan's gaze flickered to the edges of the mist, where shadows twisted and moved just beyond sight. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure, a tall shape cloaked in gray, watching from the edge of the fog. But when she blinked, it was gone, and she was alone once more beneath the lantern's glow. Eloan stood beneath the lantern's glow, her breath curling softly in the chill air. Her eyes stayed fixed on the place where she had seen the figure, a tall shape cloaked in gray, blurred by the fog. But now there was only silence, thick and unyielding. The mist clung to her ankles, swirling gently as if pulled by unseen tides. She took a step back, fingers brushing the cool iron of the post, feeling the faint hum of warmth beneath her touch. The village lay hidden below, swallowed by the fog. Only the narrow path she'd climbed was visible, winding back down the hill, its stones slick with dew. Eloan's heart fluttered with the whisper of uncertainty, but something stronger pushed her forward, a feeling like a thread pulling her towards something she couldn't yet see. Her gaze drifted back to the lantern, its flame flickering with silver light. Symbols carved along the iron post shimmered faintly, curling in delicate spirals and crescent shapes. She traced one with her fingertips, feeling its edges warm beneath her touch. It pulsed gently, almost alive, sending a soft hum through her fingertips. Eloan pulled her hand back, eyes scanning the mist for any sign of movement. A whisper of wind stirred the branches above, sending leaves tumbling across the path. Eloan's eyes followed the swirling fog, watching as it coiled and uncoiled along the edges of the lantern's glow. She hesitated, then stepped away from the post, her eyes sweeping the shadows. Just then, movement flickered at the edge of her vision, a ripple of gray slipping smoothly between the trees. Her breath caught, heart quickening as she strained to see. The mist parted just slightly, revealing the faint outline of a figure, tall and unmoving, its edges blurred by shadow. Eloan took another step back, her hand brushing the iron post once more. For a long moment, she stared, waiting for it to move. But the fog swirled back into place, erasing the shape entirely. Silence returned, stretching thin and delicate across the hilltop. Eloan exhaled slowly, fingers still resting on the cool iron, her gaze locked on the shadows. She whispered to herself, voice soft as the mist, "I am not alone." Eloan's hand lingered on the iron post, the hum of warmth still thrumming beneath her fingertips. Her gaze shifted to the stones at her feet, slick with dew and faintly shimmering. She knelt, brushing aside damp leaves that had gathered there, her fingers tracing the smooth surface of the stone. Beneath the fog and fallen leaves, she uncovered symbols, spirals and lines, woven together like strands of ivy. The designs pulsed softly under her touch, warm and steady. Eloan frowned, brushing away more of the leaves. Symbols stretched out in spirals, connected by thin lines that glimmered faintly in the light of the lantern. Her fingertips tingled as she traced their edges, feeling a gentle pull, like the hum of a distant current. She leaned closer, the mist curling around her like soft breath. The fog thickened as she uncovered more of the markings, revealing patterns that spread outward from the base of the lantern. A soft vibration filled the air, so faint it was almost more of a feeling than a sound. Eloan looked up, searching the fog for movement, but there was only stillness. Her hand pressed against the final symbol she had uncovered, and the ground beneath her fingers seemed to pulse. Eloan drew back, heart fluttering as the symbols began to glow, their edges shimmering with pale light. She watched in silence as the designs wove together, spreading across the stones like threads of moonlight. The mist parted slightly, revealing something she had not seen before, a low door, narrow and smooth, set into the hillside itself. Its surface was dark and polished, etched with spirals that glowed faintly, matching the symbols on the stone. Eloan rose slowly, eyes fixed on the door, the lantern's light flickering gently behind her. She stepped forward, breath curling in misty plumes as she pressed her palm to the cool surface. The stone shivered under her touch, then swung inward with the soft sigh of stone against stone, revealing only shadow beyond. Eloan hesitated, but only for a moment. She took a breath, steadying herself, and stepped into the darkness. The fog curled gently behind her, closing the door with a whisper, leaving the lantern's light flickering softly atop the hill. Eloan stepped forward, the heavy door whispering shut behind her. Darkness wrapped around her like a cloak, soft and cool, threaded with the scent of rain and old stone. For a moment, she stood still, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light. A faint glow traced the edges of the path ahead, casting soft reflections that shimmered like distant stars. The corridor stretched out before her, narrow and lined with smooth stone walls. Along its length, faint symbols glimmered, their light pulsing gently as if in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She took a step forward, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the thick air. Her fingers brushed the wall, tracing the carvings that wove along its surface. They felt warm beneath her touch, almost alive. Eloan moved carefully, her eyes scanning the shadows that clung to the edges of the passage. The air grew cooler as she walked, and with each step, the light from the symbols grew brighter, casting faint patterns across the stone floor. She paused once, listening to the silence that hung thick and unmoving. It was as if the world outside had vanished entirely, leaving only this path that wound onward into shadow. She pressed on, her footsteps soft and measured. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, curving gently, and dipping downward as if spiraling into the heart of the hill. The glow of the symbols pulsed brighter, illuminating the walls with a silvery light that danced in delicate patterns. Eloan watched them as she walked, noting the way they shifted and curled, revealing shapes that seemed to whisper just beyond understanding. At last, the path leveled out, and she found herself standing before a wide archway. Mist pooled at its edges, spilling softly across the floor, swirling in slow patterns. Eloan stepped forward, her breath catching as she crossed the threshold. Before her stretched a vast chamber, its walls lined with mirrors that rose into shadowed heights. Each mirror flickered with light, casting soft reflections that shimmered like water rippling beneath moonlight. She moved closer, eyes fixed on the nearest mirror. Her own reflection gazed back at her, but the light around it wavered, revealing glimpses of movement just beyond its surface. Eloan stepped back, heart quickening. It was like staring through water, there, but not there, flickering between what was real and what was hidden. Eloan's breath steadied, and she took another step forward, eyes locked on the mirror's surface. Her reflection shimmered faintly, soft ripples of light spreading from where she stood. The chamber stretched wide, the mirrors reflecting not just her own image but fragments of the corridor she had left behind, fog coiling around stones, the lantern flickering atop the hill. But there were other images, too. Shapes she did not recognize. In one mirror, she saw a field covered in frost, the grass silvered and brittle under a pale dawn. Shadows moved across it, soft and slow, their edges blurring like mist. Another mirror showed a river winding through dense forest, its waters sparkling with light, untouched by wind or ripple. Eloan stepped closer, fingertips grazing the cool glass. The image wavered beneath her touch, the surface rippling like water. She pulled her hand back, eyes wide. The mirrors pulsed gently, as if breathing in time with the distant hum she could now hear, a soft vibration that lingered at the edge of hearing. Eloan moved along the edge of the chamber, each mirror reflecting something different, a stone bridge covered in ivy, an orchard heavy with blossoms that swayed though no wind stirred. She watched them all, fascination threading through her thoughts. At the far end of the chamber stood a mirror larger than the rest, its frame wrought from dark iron, etched with symbols that glowed faintly. Eloan approached it slowly, the mist curling around her feet as she moved. Her hand reached out, pausing just before touching the surface. In its depths, she saw not her own reflection, but the lantern burning atop the hill, its light flickering with silver and gold. Eloan's fingers brushed the glass, and the surface shimmered beneath her touch. Her heart quickened as the mirror began to glow, light spreading from its center, casting long shadows that danced along the chamber walls. She stepped back, watching as the light grew brighter, illuminating symbols that had been hidden in shadow. They pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. Eloan stepped back, her hand slipping from the surface of the mirror. Light pulsed gently across its surface, casting shimmering reflections along the chamber walls. Symbols etched into the iron frame glowed brighter, weaving patterns of silver and gold that rippled like moonlight on water. She watched in silence, her breath soft and steady, as the mirror's glow intensified, filling the room with a warm, soothing light. A whisper stirred the air, soft as the rustle of leaves. Eloan's heart quickened, and she turned, eyes scanning the shadows that lingered at the edges of the chamber. The whisper grew louder, not words, but a melody threaded with something ancient, like a song half forgotten. It curled around her, soft and steady, drawing her gaze back to the mirror. Her reflection shimmered, flickering between light and shadow. For a moment, she saw herself not in the stone chamber, but upon the mist-covered hill, standing beneath the lantern's glow. The fog swirled around her ankles, and the light stretched out like ribbons of silver. Her breath caught as the whisper grew clearer, the words finally unfolding, "The path is not yet complete." Eloan stepped back, her eyes widening as the light from the mirror flickered, then settled into a gentle glow. The whisper faded, leaving only the soft hum of silence behind. She glanced around the chamber, her gaze sweeping over the mirrors that lined the walls. Each one was still now, their surfaces smooth and undisturbed. Her heartbeat steadied, and she took a deep breath, feeling the cool air settle in her lungs. The path, she turned back to the large mirror, studying its surface with careful eyes. The lantern was still there, flickering gently in the mist. Eloan stepped closer, her fingertips grazing the iron edge of the frame. It thrummed beneath her touch, warm and steady. A soft shimmer rippled across the glass, and she saw movement, shadows slipping between the trees, pale light flickering in the fog. The lantern's glow pulsed gently, casting long shadows across the hillside. Eloan leaned in, her breath fogging the glass. A shape appeared at the edge of the light, a figure, cloaked and still, watching from the shadows. She blinked, and it vanished, leaving only the flicker of the lantern behind. Eloan stepped back from the mirror, her breath coming slow and steady. The light around her pulsed softly, fading back to a gentle glow. She took a moment to gather her thoughts, fingers still brushing the cool iron of the frame. The whisper she had heard lingered in her mind, soft and distant, like a dream slipping just out of reach. Her eyes drifted down the iron frame, tracing the symbols that wound along its surface. At the base of the mirror, half hidden beneath a curl of mist, she saw something glimmer. Eloan knelt, brushing the fog away with gentle hands. There, nestled into a groove in the iron, lay a small silver key. It was delicate and cool, engraved with patterns that shimmered faintly in the soft light. Her fingers closed around it, and a warmth spread through her palm, threading up her arm like sunlight breaking through clouds. Eloan stood, the key resting lightly in her grasp. She turned it over, studying the markings that lined its surface, spirals and crescents, woven together in delicate loops. It felt familiar, though she could not place why. Eloan's gaze returned to the chamber, her eyes sweeping over the mirrors that lined the walls. Each one remained still, their surfaces dark and smooth, but the hum of warmth beneath her fingers pulsed gently, guiding her attention to the far end of the room. There, shrouded in mist, a narrow door stood, its frame carved with symbols that mirrored those upon the key. She stepped forward, the mist parting before her like water. The door was dark and smooth, etched with silver spirals that glowed faintly under her touch. Eloan pressed her hand to its surface, feeling the cool metal shift beneath her fingertips. The key slid easily into the lock, turning with a soft click. The door shuddered, then swung inward, revealing only shadow beyond. Eloan hesitated, her hand resting on the edge of the doorway. The mirrors behind her flickered softly, light pulsing in time with the whisper of wind that stirred the mist. She took a breath, steadying herself, and stepped forward, vanishing into the dark. Eloan stepped through the doorway, shadows slipping across her shoulders like threads of silk. The air beyond was cool and still, scented faintly with rain and lavender. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw that she was standing on a narrow path, its surface smooth and silvered as if dusted with starlight. The path stretched onward, lined with tall, pale stones that glimmered faintly in the darkness. Mist pooled around her ankles, swirling gently as she took her first steps forward. The air was hushed, broken only by the soft whisper of her footsteps against the polished stone. She glanced back, but the doorway she had passed through was gone, replaced by shadow and mist. Only the path remained, winding into the distance, illuminated by the faint shimmer of light that rippled along its edges. Eloan walked carefully, her eyes tracing the delicate symbols etched into the stones beside her. Spirals and crescents, woven together like threads in a tapestry, pulsed softly as she passed, their light flickering in patterns that seemed to shift and change. She reached out, fingers brushing the surface of one of the stones. It was warm beneath her touch, humming gently like the strings of a distant harp. The mist grew thicker as she moved forward, curling around her feet, whispering softly against her cloak. Eloan pressed on, the light from the stones guiding her steps. Her heartbeat settled into a steady rhythm, matching the soft pulse of light that shimmered along the path. She felt as though she were moving through a dream, weightless and unbound, her steps unmarked by time. At last, the path opened into a wide clearing, its edges shrouded in silver mist. At the center of the clearing stood a pedestal, dark and smooth, carved with symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. Resting upon it was a lantern, smaller than the one atop the hill, but burning with the same silver flame. Its light flickered gently, casting soft patterns across the mist-covered ground. Eloan stepped closer, the mist parting before her like breath on glass. Her fingers grazed the edge of the pedestal, feeling warmth spread through her fingertips. The lantern shimmered, its flame pulsing gently as if greeting her. She watched its light flicker and bend, casting long shadows that rippled across the clearing. Her hand hovered above it, the soft hum of warmth drawing her nearer. The flame within the lantern flickered brighter as Eloan's hand hovered above it, casting light that danced across her fingertips. She hesitated, feeling the warmth pulse gently, as if the lantern itself were breathing. The mist around her swirled slowly, curling into thin spirals that stretched across the clearing. Eloan took a deep breath and touched the lantern's edge. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, the light flared, casting silver rays that stretched out across the clearing, illuminating symbols carved into the stones around her. They shimmered softly, their edges glowing with threads of light that wound together like roots of ancient trees. Eloan stepped back, eyes wide as the mist parted, revealing paths that stretched outward from the pedestal, winding into shadowed distance. At the edge of her vision, movement flickered. Eloan turned, heart quickening as she caught sight of a figure emerging from the mist. Cloaked in gray, its form blurred at the edges, the figure stepped forward, each stride soundless upon the stone path. A hood shadowed its face, but as it neared, Eloan saw the faint glimmer of silver rings upon its hands, hands that moved with gentle grace, tracing patterns in the air. The figure paused before her, the mist settling around its feet like soft ribbons. Its voice, when it spoke, was soft and measured, like leaves brushing against the wind. "You have come far," it whispered, the words curling through the air with a weight that pressed gently against her heart. Eloan swallowed, her hand still resting against the lantern's cool surface. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure tilted its head, shadows shifting beneath its hood. "I am the keeper of the light," it replied, its voice slipping through the mist like a distant song. "And you have been chosen to tend the flame, as all who find the path must." Eloan stared, her breath caught in her throat. The keeper's hand rose slowly, fingertips brushing the edge of the lantern. The flame flared gently, casting patterns of silver light that shimmered across the stones. "The light is not just fire," the keeper whispered. "It is memory, it is the thread that binds shadow to dawn. And now, it is yours to guard." Eloan stood still, the keeper's words settling softly in the air around her. Her hand remained on the lantern's surface, feeling the warmth pulse gently beneath her fingertips. The light flickered, casting silver threads of light that danced across the stones. She took a breath, steadying herself, her eyes lifting to meet the shadowed gaze beneath the keeper's hood. "What does it mean?" she asked quietly, her voice soft against the stillness. The keeper's head tilted slightly, its movements smooth and unhurried. "The light is more than flame," it whispered. "It is the memory of all things, each shadow, each dawn, every path that winds through mist and moonlight. It must be tended, watched over, protected." Eloan glanced down at the lantern, its flame flickering with pale silver hues. "And I am to guard it?" she murmured, her voice laced with wonder. The keeper stepped forward, its robes whispering against the stones. "You are chosen," it replied. "The path is never opened by chance. Those who reach the light are called to tend it. You are its keeper now." The words settled in Eloan's heart like a soft sigh. Her fingers traced the edge of the lantern, feeling the cool metal warm beneath her touch. The mist around them swirled gently, parting to reveal the path she had walked, its surface still shimmering with silver light. She looked back to the keeper, her breath steady. "What must I do?" she asked. The keeper raised a hand, its fingers pale and graceful, silver rings glimmering with faint light. "Walk the path," it whispered. "Let the light guide you. Tend to its flame, guard its secrets, and it will show you what lies beyond the mist." As it spoke, the lantern flared gently, casting long shadows that flickered across the stones. The keeper stepped back, its form growing faint at the edges, dissolving softly into mist. "Follow the light," it whispered, its voice slipping away like the last sigh of wind through leaves. Eloan watched as it vanished entirely, leaving only the gentle glow of the lantern and the stillness of the clearing behind. Eloan stood alone in the clearing, the lantern burning steadily before her. Its light stretched out across the stones, casting long shadows that wavered gently in the mist. She reached out, lifting the lantern from its place upon the pedestal. It was lighter than she expected, its surface warm beneath her hands, pulsing gently with each step she took. The mist parted as she moved forward, revealing the path that wound back toward the hilltop. Eloan followed it with careful steps, the silver light guiding her way. The stones beneath her feet shimmered faintly, carved with symbols that pulsed with the same rhythm as the flame she carried. She walked in silence, the air cool and still, her breath curling in soft plumes that vanished into the fog. As she walked, memories flickered at the edges of her mind, soft whispers of places she had never seen, fields covered in frost beneath a silver moon, rivers winding through mist-covered forests, doorways hidden beneath ancient roots. The light of the lantern flickered gently, casting reflections that shimmered like distant stars. At last, the path curved upward, leading back to the very hill where her journey had begun. The mist thinned, revealing the familiar iron post, dark and etched with spirals that glimmered faintly. Eloan paused at the top, holding the lantern aloft. Its light stretched out over Renbrook, spilling down the hillside and touching the rooftops with silver light. She watched as the mist curled back, revealing the village nestled peacefully beneath the glow. Eloan set the lantern upon the iron post, its flame burning steady and bright. She stepped back, breath slow and calm, watching as the light flickered softly, casting shadows that danced across the stones. The fog whispered around her feet, swirling gently before settling into stillness. A whisper threaded through the mist, soft and distant, "The light endures." Eloan smiled, her gaze fixed on the lantern's glow. She turned from the hilltop, her steps light and unhurried, the mist parting before her as she walked back down the winding path. Behind her, the lantern burned on, its light stretching out across the village, steady and eternal, as it always had. A hidden garden where stars fall like petals, tended by an ageless keeper. One night, a traveler steps inside, unlocking memories long forgotten. At the edge of a forgotten coastline, where the cliffs met the sea and mist clung to the rocks like whispers of old dreams, there lay a garden hidden from sight. Its entrance was marked only by an iron gate, woven with ivy and rusted by the breath of countless storms. Few knew of its existence, and those who did spoke of it only in hushed tones, as if the mere mention of its name might cause it to vanish. They called it the Garden of Falling Stars. Beneath its canopy of twilight skies, stars did not merely shine, they fell, drifting down like petals from a tree that had known the first breath of dawn. Some said the garden was tended by an ageless keeper, a figure whose footsteps left no mark upon the grass and whose hands knew the language of stars. Others claimed it was abandoned, left to dream in silence, its paths winding forever beneath a sky that never truly darkened. It was on an evening thick with fog that a traveler found herself wandering along the cliffs. Her name was Lyria, and she moved with a quiet grace, her footsteps light against the stone paths. The mist curled around her ankles, whispering softly as she walked. She had come to the cliffs in search of solitude, to watch the sea stretch out beneath the weight of twilight. But as she walked, her eyes caught the glimmer of something beyond the mist, a light, faint and shimmering, flickering just at the edge of sight. Curiosity stirred within her, gentle and unyielding. She followed the light as it blinked softly in the fog, leading her further from the path she had known. The cliffs faded into shadow, the sea's whispers growing distant and soft. Lyria moved carefully, the mist thickening as she pressed on, until at last she stood before the iron gate. It was taller than she had imagined, its arches woven with vines that curled like sleeping serpents. The light flickered again, softer now, as if beckoning. Lyria reached out, her fingers brushing the cool iron. The gate shuddered slightly beneath her touch, and with a whisper like the breath of autumn wind, it creaked inward, revealing the garden beyond. Stars hung suspended in the branches of great silver trees, their light casting soft patterns across the moss-covered paths. Lyria stepped forward, breathless and still, the mist curling around her ankles as she crossed the threshold into the garden. The garden stretched out before her, vast and silent, illuminated by the gentle glow of falling stars. Great trees with silver bark arched overhead, their branches reaching out like the arms of ancient sentinels. Tiny lights hung from their limbs, swaying softly in the breeze. Lyria stepped forward, her eyes wide with wonder. She had never seen anything like it, the stars themselves drifting down like petals, settling upon the grass before winking out with a soft shimmer. Her footsteps left no mark on the moss-covered path as she wandered deeper into the garden. The air smelled of rain and distant thunder, cool and sharp against her skin. She reached out, her fingers brushing the bark of one of the silver trees. It was smooth and warm, pulsing faintly beneath her touch as if alive. Lyria pulled her hand back, eyes tracing the glow that spread gently along the bark before fading into shadow. As she moved through the winding paths, she began to notice details she had missed before, flowers that glowed with soft blue light, their petals trembling with each whisper of wind. Pools of still water lay cradled in stone basins, their surfaces reflecting the stars above as if the night sky itself had spilled across the earth. Lyria knelt beside one of the pools, her reflection rippling gently across the surface. For a moment, she thought she saw something move just beyond her own image, a flicker of light, soft and distant. Her breath stilled, and she leaned closer, eyes fixed on the surface. But the light was gone, leaving only the stillness of water and the soft glow of the stars. Lyria stood slowly, glancing around the garden. It was silent and serene, untouched by time, as if it had been waiting patiently for her to arrive. She took another step forward, the mist parting before her, revealing paths that wound deeper into the heart of the garden, where the light grew brighter and the stars fell thicker. Lyria wandered deeper into the garden, each step guided by the soft glow of falling stars. They drifted down like petals, settling on the grass with a faint shimmer before winking out, leaving only the memory of light behind. The trees above swayed gently, their silver branches whispering in the wind, scattering droplets of stardust that glittered in the air. She followed the winding path, her footsteps silent upon the moss-covered ground. The mist curled around her ankles, parting gracefully as she walked. Pools of water shimmered with soft light, their surfaces reflecting constellations that seemed to flicker and dance. Lyria paused beside one, her gaze tracing the stars that stretched across its surface. She reached out, fingertips grazing the water, and ripples spread outward, distorting the light. A whisper stirred the air, soft and melodic, like a breeze threading through leaves. Lyria straightened, her eyes scanning the misty paths that stretched before her. The whisper grew clearer, weaving gently through the garden, carrying with it a rhythm that felt familiar, though she could not place its origin. She stepped forward, following the sound as it led her between the silver trees. The light grew softer as she walked, shimmering with hues of violet and pale blue. The path curved gently, leading her to a clearing where the mist hung thicker, swirling in slow spirals. At the center stood a figure cloaked in gray, their back turned to her, hands outstretched as if cradling the very stars that fell around them. Lyria paused, her breath caught in her throat. The figure moved with a gentle grace, plucking stars from the air and placing them into the branches of the nearest tree. As their hands touched the silver bark, light spread along its surface, shimmering softly before fading back into shadow. The figure turned slowly, their face hidden by a hood of pale gray cloth. Lyria took a step forward, the mist curling around her feet. "Are you the keeper of this place?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. The figure inclined its head, a gesture of greeting. "I am," came the whisper, soft as a sigh. "And you are the first to step through the gate in many years." Lyria stepped closer, her eyes never leaving the figure's shadowed face. Their hands were delicate and pale, fingertips dusted with faint light, as if the stars themselves had kissed their skin. The keeper turned back to the tree, fingertips brushing its surface. A ripple of light spread from their touch, illuminating the branches with gentle silver. "Do the stars always fall like this?" Lyria asked, her voice threading softly through the mist. The keeper paused, their hand lingering against the bark. "They do," they replied. "They have since the garden was first planted, long before the cliffs wore thin and the mist grew thick." Their voice was soft and melodic, carrying the weight of ages that stretched back through forgotten dawns. Lyria watched as another star drifted down from the canopy above, its light flickering softly before settling into the grass. The keeper knelt gracefully, gathering it into their hands. For a moment, the star pulsed gently, its light reflecting in the depths of the keeper's hood. They held it delicately, as if it were fragile, and reached upward, placing it gently upon the highest branch of the tree. The star shimmered brightly for a moment, then grew still, its light joining the others that hung like fruit along the silver limbs. "What becomes of them?" Lyria asked, her eyes tracing the stars that adorned the branches. "Where do they go?" The keeper turned, and though their face remained hidden, Lyria could feel the weight of their gaze. "They return," the keeper whispered, "to the sky from which they came. But only when the time is right, and their light has been remembered." Lyria blinked, her thoughts brushing against the mystery of the words. "Remembered?" she asked, stepping closer. The keeper inclined their head once more. "Every star is a memory," they replied. "Some are old and weary, some are bright and new. They rest here until they are ready to return, carrying with them the light of those who have watched them fall." Lyria's gaze drifted upward, her breath catching as she stared into the canopy of stars, each one flickering gently with soft light. She thought of the nights she had spent staring at the sky, watching the stars blink softly in the darkness. And she wondered how many of them had passed through this garden, resting gently upon these silver branches before returning to the sky. Lyria's gaze lingered on the canopy of stars, each one flickering softly like a breath held between moments. The keeper stood silently beside her, their hands folded gently before them, their hood tilted toward the branches. "Do you tend them all?" Lyria asked, her voice hushed as if afraid to disturb the fragile light. The keeper nodded slowly. "Each one," they replied. "Every star that falls must be caught and placed back upon the branches. If they are left to fade, their light is lost forever, and the memory with it." Lyria watched as a star drifted softly from the branches above, tumbling gently through the mist. The keeper stepped forward, hands outstretched, and caught it with practiced grace. Their fingers cradled the tiny light, its glow pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of a bird. Lyria took a step closer, watching as the keeper placed the star upon the branch of a nearby tree. Its light shimmered brightly before settling into a soft glow. "What kind of memories are they?" Lyria asked, her gaze tracing the light that spread along the branch. The keeper was silent for a moment, their hooded face turned toward the silver limbs. "All kinds," they whispered finally. "Dreams of the wandering, the whispers of the lonely, the wishes made upon distant skies. Each one is a thread of light, woven into the night. Here, they are remembered, tended, and given rest until they are ready to rise again." Lyria stood still, her heart steady, her breath soft against the cool air. "And do they always rise again?" she asked. The keeper's head inclined gently. "When they are ready," came the reply, "when their light has been restored, and the memory is whole." A silence stretched between them, soft and fragile. Lyria reached out, her fingertips brushing the edge of a low-hanging branch. It pulsed gently beneath her touch, warmth spreading up her arm, threading softly through her thoughts. She withdrew her hand, blinking back the trace of memory that flickered at the edges of her mind. "Would you like to see?" the keeper asked suddenly, their voice threaded with something light and unspoken. Lyria turned to them, her heart quickening. "See what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The keeper raised a hand, their fingers glowing softly with pale light. "The stars remember," they whispered. "And sometimes, they allow others to remember too." Without hesitation, Lyria stepped closer, her gaze fixed upon the keeper's outstretched hand. Pale light shimmered along their fingertips, casting silver threads that wove gently through the air. The stars above flickered brighter, their glow stretching outward, illuminating the mist with threads of light that danced and shimmered. The keeper raised their hand, and the silver light spiraled outward, gathering in soft ribbons that curled between the branches. Lyria watched, breathless, as the light wove itself into shapes, soft and flickering, like memories caught between waking and sleep. At first, they were mere whispers of form, drifting shadows of people and places she could not quite see. But as the light grew stronger, the images sharpened, revealing scenes that shimmered with distant light. Lyria stepped forward, her hand brushing the edge of one glowing ribbon. It pulsed beneath her fingertips, and the image within the light flared gently. She saw a village she did not recognize, its rooftops blanketed in snow, lanterns flickering along narrow streets. Shadows moved between the houses, people wrapped in heavy cloaks, their faces hidden against the chill of winter. Lyria blinked, her hand falling back. The image rippled and faded, curling back into mist. The keeper watched her, their hood tilted slightly. "The stars remember all they see," they whispered. "Every path taken, every wish spoken beneath their light. Here, they are kept safe, waiting for their light to be whole once more." Lyria stared at the branches above, her heart stirring with a gentle ache. "And what happens when they are whole?" she asked, her voice soft. The keeper's hands folded gracefully before them. "They rise," came the reply, returning to the sky from which they came. "Their light grows stronger, their memory clearer. And when they shine, those who once wished upon them feel their light again." A silence stretched between them, soft as the mist that curled around their feet. Lyria glanced back at the branches, her gaze tracing the soft glow of the stars. She felt the weight of their light, the softness of their fall, and for the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to hold such light in her own hands. Lyria stood beneath the silver canopy, her eyes tracing the paths of light that spiraled gently above her. The stars hung from the branches like delicate lanterns, their glow casting soft shadows that flickered across the mossy ground. She reached out, fingertips grazing the bark of a nearby tree. It pulsed with warmth, a gentle hum that thrummed beneath her touch. The keeper watched her in silence, their hooded face tilted toward the branches. Lyria turned back to them, her voice soft with wonder. "Can they speak?" she asked, her hand still resting against the smooth bark. "The stars." The keeper stepped closer, the mist parting gracefully before their feet. "Not in words," they replied, their voice threaded with something like reverence. "But in light and memory. If you listen carefully, sometimes you can hear their whispers." Lyria stilled, her hand pressing more firmly against the tree. For a moment, there was only silence, the whisper of wind through the branches, the distant sigh of mist curling against the stones. Then, softly, like the rustle of leaves in autumn, she heard it. A whisper, faint and distant, threading through the bark beneath her fingertips. Her breath caught, and she pressed her ear to the tree's surface. The whispers grew clearer, not voices exactly, but impressions, like fragments of dreams. She heard the sigh of wind across snow-covered fields, the laughter of children chasing fireflies beneath summer skies, the quiet breath of dawn stretching across an empty shore. They drifted through her mind like memories caught between moments, soft and fleeting. Lyria pulled back, eyes wide. "They remember everything," she whispered, her voice barely carrying through the mist. The keeper inclined their head. "They do," they replied. "Every path, every breath, every wish spoken beneath their light. They carry them here, in the garden, until they are ready to shine again." Lyria looked back to the branches, her heart steady and calm. "How long do they stay?" she asked, her voice gentle. The keeper stepped forward, their hands brushing the low-hanging leaves. "As long as they must," they replied, "until the memory is strong enough to light the sky once more." The stars shimmered softly above them, their light spilling across the moss-covered ground in gentle waves. Lyria watched as the keeper moved between the branches, their hands reaching out to catch drifting stars that fell like petals in slow spirals. Each one shimmered gently in their palms before being placed upon the branches to glow softly with renewed light. Lyria followed, her footsteps light against the moss. "How long have you been tending the stars?" she asked, her voice soft. The keeper paused, their hood turning slightly as if listening to the wind. "Longer than I remember," they whispered. The garden was planted long before the cliffs rose from the sea, before the mist covered the paths. The stars have always fallen, and I have always tended them. Lyria watched as the keeper caught another star, its light pulsing gently against their palms. "Would you like to try?" the keeper asked, their voice threaded with kindness. Lyria blinked in surprise. "Me?" she asked. The keeper nodded, stepping back, their hands still cupped around the tiny light. "The stars belong to all who seek them," they whispered. "You have wandered far to find this place. Perhaps it is time you held one. Without hesitation, Lyria stepped forward, her hands outstretched. The keeper placed the tiny star into her palms, its warmth spilling across her skin like sunlight on water. It shimmered softly, its light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Lyria held it carefully, breath caught in her throat. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The keepers stepped back, their hands folding gracefully before them. "It remembers you," they said gently. Lyria glanced up, her eyes wide. "Me?" she breathed. The keeper nodded. "All stars carry memories. Sometimes they belong to those who hold them, sometimes to those yet to come." Lyria stared down at the light cradled in her hands, her heart steady and sure. For a moment, she thought she saw something flicker within its glow, a shadow of a path, winding through mist-covered trees, her own footsteps light against the moss. She blinked, and the image faded, leaving only the warmth of the star and the soft hum of light. Lyria held the star in her hands, its light pulsing gently against her palms. The warmth spread through her fingertips, threading up her arms like soft whispers of sunlight. She gazed down at its glow, watching as faint patterns danced across its surface, spirals and crescents that shimmered with silver light. Her breath slowed, matching the rhythm of its gentle flicker. The keeper watched her in silence, their hooded face tilted slightly, hands folded gracefully before them. "What do you see?" they asked softly. Lyria blinked, her gaze still fixed on the star. "I don't know," she murmured. "There are shapes, like paths, winding through mist. It feels like..." She paused, searching for the words, "like I've walked them before." The keepers stepped closer, their movements smooth and unhurried. "Every star carries a path," they whispered. "A memory of where it has been and where it must go. Some are clear, others are hidden, waiting to be uncovered." Their hand reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the star. Its light flared gently, casting soft shadows that rippled across the moss-covered ground. Lyria watched as the patterns upon its surface grew clearer, threading together like strands of silver light. She leaned closer, eyes tracing the lines as they shimmered and shifted. For a brief moment, she saw a hill covered in mist, a lantern flickering at its peak, its light stretching out across cobbled paths. She blinked, and the image faded, curling back into threads of light. Her breath caught, and she looked back to the keeper. "I saw." She began, but the keeper nodded gently. "It is the memory of light," they whispered. "The stars remember their journey through the sky. Those who watch them, those who wish upon them, their paths become entwined. Here, the stars rest, waiting for the light to be whole again." Lyria stared down at the star in her hands, feeling its warmth pulse against her skin. She could almost feel the weight of those memories, the flicker of light stretching across distant paths, winding between shadow and dawn. Her fingers tightened slightly, holding it close. "Can I keep it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The keeper's hood tilted slightly, and though Lyria could not see their face, she felt the weight of their gaze. "It is yours," they whispered. "For as long as the light remains." Lyria cradled the star in her hands, its light spilling over her fingertips like drops of silver rain. The mist curled gently around her feet, whispering softly as she stepped forward. The keeper walked beside her, their movements silent and fluid, the folds of their cloak brushing the ground without a sound. The silver branches above shimmered with light, their leaves catching stardust that drifted softly through the air. As they walked, Lyria watched the stars that hung from the branches. Each one flickered gently, casting soft ripples of light that shimmered like reflections on water. "Do they all have paths?" she asked, her voice soft. The keeper inclined their head. "They do," they replied. "Every star remembers its journey, even when it rests here in the garden. When the time is right, they rise again to the sky, carrying the light of those who once dreamed beneath them." Lyria looked down at the star in her hands, its glow warm and steady. "Will this one rise too?" she asked. The keeper paused, their hood turning slightly as if considering her question. "Perhaps," they replied. "But only when its light is ready. Until then, it belongs to you." They continued walking, the mist parting softly as they moved. Lyria held the star close, feeling its light warm her palms. The memory of that hilltop flickered at the edge of her mind, the lantern glowing through the fog, its light stretching across the cobbled paths. She wondered if the star she held had once hung above that very hill, its light casting shadows upon the stones. At last, the path opened into a wide clearing, its edges shrouded in mist. At the center stood a pedestal of smooth stone, its surface polished and dark, carved with symbols that glowed faintly beneath the soft light. Lyria stepped forward, the star still cradled in her hands. The keeper stood back, their hands folded gracefully before them. "Place it here," they whispered. "Let it rest. Its light will grow stronger beneath the sky." Lyria hesitated, her fingers brushing the smooth surface of the star. But she stepped forward, placing it gently upon the pedestal. Its light flared softly, casting long shadows that rippled across the clearing. Lyria stepped back, watching as the star pulsed gently, its glow spreading outward in soft spirals. She felt the warmth linger in her palms, even as she stepped away. The keeper inclined their head, their voice soft and steady. "Its light will remember you," they whispered. "And one day, when it rises, its glow will touch the path you walk." Lyria stepped back from the pedestal, her eyes lingering on the soft glow of the star she had placed there. Its light pulsed gently, casting silver threads across the smooth stone surface, flickering with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. She watched in silence, her breath soft against the mist that curled around her ankles. The keeper stood beside her, their hands folded gracefully, the folds of their cloak whispering against the moss-covered ground. "Is that it?" Lyria asked softly, her gaze still fixed on the star. "Will it stay here forever?" The keeper turned their hooded face toward her, the shadows shifting gently beneath the fabric. "No," they replied. "It will rest. Its light will grow stronger, and when it is ready, it will rise to the sky once more. Its memory will shine across the night, and those who look upon it will remember." Lyria considered this, her hands folding gently before her. "And the memories?" she asked. "Will they remember too?" The keeper's hands moved slowly, tracing the edge of the pedestal with fingertips that glowed faintly with silver light. "They always remember," they whispered. Every wish, every dream, every whispered hope that was spoken beneath their light. When a star returns to the sky, it carries those memories with it, like threads woven into the fabric of night. Lyria's gaze drifted upward, to the canopy of stars that flickered above the garden. She thought of the nights she had spent staring up at the sky, watching the stars blink softly against the velvet dark. She wondered if one of them had once rested here, its light carefully tended and its memory gently cradled by the keeper. The thought warmed her heart, and she looked back to the keeper. "What happens now?" she asked. The keeper inclined their head toward the path that wound back into the silver trees. "The garden stretches far," they replied. "There are more stars to tend, more light to gather. Would you like to see?" Lyria hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Yes," she whispered. The keeper turned gracefully, their cloak brushing softly against the ground as they began to walk. Lyria followed, the mist parting gently before them, the stars above flickering softly in greeting. The path wound deeper into the garden, the air growing cooler as they walked. Mist coiled around the roots of the silver trees, whispering softly as it moved. The keeper led with smooth steps, their hooded forms slipping between branches that shimmered with the light of sleeping stars. Lyria followed close behind, her heart steady, her breath soft against the chill. They reached a clearing where the mist thickened, swirling in slow spirals around tall pillars of stone. At the center of the clearing stood a fountain, its surface still and smooth as glass. Tiny lights floated upon its surface, drifting in slow, steady patterns that rippled outward in gentle waves. Lyria stepped forward, her eyes tracing the light that shimmered beneath the water. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice soft with wonder. The keeper stood beside her, their hands folded before them. "This is the heart of the garden," they replied. "Here, the stars rest before they fall. They dream of light and memory, waiting for the moment when they are called back to the sky." Lyria watched as one of the lights drifted closer to the edge of the fountain, its surface flickering with silver. She reached out, her fingertips grazing the water. A ripple spread outward, carrying the light with it, and she felt a warmth thread through her fingertips. For a brief moment, she saw something flicker across the surface of the water, a field covered in frost, a path winding through mist, her own footsteps light against the stones. Her breath caught, and she pulled her hand back. The keeper watched her, their hooded face still and calm. "The stars remember," they whispered. "Even here, as they rest, they hold the light of what has been and what may yet be. It is their way." Lyria looked back to the fountain, the lights drifting slowly across its surface. "Can I come back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The keeper inclined their head. "The gate is always open to those who seek the light," they replied. "And the stars remember those who look upon them with hope." Lyria smiled softly, her gaze lifting to the silver branches that hung heavy with stars. She knew she would return, to wander the paths, to listen to the whispers of memory, and to tend the stars that fell gently from the sky. And when she did, she knew the garden would be waiting, its light eternal, its whispers soft as falling leaves. On a misty lake, a lone boat drifts, weaving dreams into light. A dreamer steps aboard, sailing through whispers of memory. At the far edge of a forgotten coastline, where mist clung to jagged rocks and the sea whispered against the shore, stood a lighthouse unlike any other. Its light did not guide ships but shone for something else, memories lost to time and paths long forgotten. The villagers of Brackenport spoke of it in hushed voices, for few had seen it, and fewer still had wandered the cliffs where its light flickered. They called it the Lighthouse of Forgotten Paths, and it was said to appear only when the fog grew thickest, its beam stretching across the water like a silver thread. Some claimed it was always there, hidden by the mist, its light searching slowly, endlessly, for things that had been misplaced. Its keeper was a mystery too. Some spoke of eyes that saw not just the sea, but the threads of fate winding through the world. One evening, when the fog lay heavy upon the cliffs and the waves whispered secrets against the rocks, a traveler found herself wandering the shore. Her name was Elara, and she had come far from the paths she knew. The mist curled around her feet, soft and damp, and the air smelled of salt and rain. She paused, her eyes searching the horizon, and that's when she saw it, a flicker of light, pale and steady, cutting through the fog. Her breath caught, and she stepped forward, boots sinking into the wet sand. The light pulsed gently, stretching out across the mist, calling her toward the cliffs. Elara hesitated, heart fluttering, but something in that light called to her, like a whisper of a memory half forgotten. Without another thought, she followed, the fog swirling softly in her wake. Elara moved carefully through the fog, her footsteps soft against the damp earth. The light grew brighter as she climbed the winding path, its glow spilling over the mist and illuminating stones slick with moss. The lighthouse rose before her, its stone walls stretching into the mist, crowned with light that turned in slow, steady circles. She paused at the iron gate that marked the entrance, its hinges dusted with salt and age. Elara pushed it open, the metal groaning softly, and stepped onto the path that led upward. The fog curled around her ankles, whispering softly as she moved forward. She climbed with steady steps, the lighthouse looming larger with each stride. At the top, she found a heavy wooden door set into the stone, its surface etched with symbols she did not know. She reached out, her fingertips grazing the rough wood. It was cool beneath her touch, but it pulsed gently, almost alive. Elara took a breath, steadying herself, and pushed. The door swung inward with a whisper, revealing a spiral staircase lit by flickering candlelight. Shadows danced along the stone walls, casting long, thin shapes that twisted as the light wavered. Elara stepped inside, the air warm and scented with sea salt. She paused, eyes adjusting to the light, and that's when she saw him, a tall figure at the base of the staircase, his eyes watching her with a gaze that shimmered like distant stars. Elara stood in the doorway, the warmth of the lighthouse brushing against her cheeks. The figure at the base of the stairs did not move, his gaze steady and calm. He was tall, cloaked in gray, with eyes that shimmered like distant stars. His hands were clasped loosely before him, and though shadows danced across his features, there was a softness to his expression. "You found the path," he said, his voice quiet, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. Elara stepped forward, the door closing softly behind her. "I saw the light," she replied. "I followed it." The keeper inclined his head. "That is how it begins," he murmured, turning slightly toward the staircase. His movements were smooth, as if time bent around him. Without another word, he began to ascend the spiraled steps, the light from above casting gentle patterns across the stone walls. Elara hesitated only a moment before following, her footsteps soft and measured. The staircase wound upward, its edges worn smooth by years of travel. Candles flickered in niches along the walls, their flames steady and bright despite the whisper of wind that wound through the tower. The keeper moved gracefully, his hand grazing the wall as he climbed. Elara watched him carefully, noting the way his fingers brushed symbols carved into the stone, spirals and crescents, woven together like threads. They glimmered faintly under his touch, flickering softly before fading back into shadow. "What are they?" Elara asked, her voice breaking the silence. The keeper did not turn but spoke gently. "They are the marks of the forgotten," he replied. "Paths that once existed, memories that once were, waiting to be found again." His hand lingered on one of the symbols, its edges glowing faintly. Elara stepped closer, her breath soft in the stillness. The light shimmered beneath his fingertips, and she thought she saw it ripple like water. The staircase wound higher, each step bringing with it a deeper stillness. Elara followed the keeper in silence, her eyes tracing the flickering shadows that danced along the stone walls. At last, the staircase opened into a wide room, its ceiling stretching high above, lit by lanterns that swayed gently as if touched by an unseen breeze. Elara stepped forward, her eyes widening as she took in the sight before her. The walls were lined with maps, old and faded, their edges curled with age. They stretched across the stone, pinned with silver tacks, each one marked with pathways that wound through mountains, forests, and cities she did not recognize. Lines curved and twisted, some ending in spirals, others branching off into faint trails that faded into the edges of the parchment. "What is this place?" she whispered, her voice soft with wonder. The keeper moved gracefully to the center of the room, his hands folded behind him. "These are the forgotten paths," he replied. "Roads that have been lost to time, trails that once were and now only linger in memory." Elara stepped closer to one of the maps, her fingertips grazing its surface. It was cool beneath her touch, the ink shimmering faintly as if still alive. Her eyes traced the curves of rivers and the sprawl of cities that seemed to ripple beneath the light. "Are they real?" she asked, her breath catching as the symbols shimmered beneath her hand. The keeper nodded slowly. "They are real," he murmured. "Or they were. Some may yet be found, if the path is remembered." Elara glanced back at him, her heart stirring with a whisper of hope. "And if they are remembered?" she asked. His eyes met hers, and though his gaze was steady, there was a softness in it. "Then they return," he replied. "Just as you have." Elara stood before the maps, her fingertips grazing the edges of faded parchment. Trails looped and spiraled across the surface, marked with symbols she did not recognize. Some paths were bold and clear, while others faded into whispers of ink, like memories on the edge of forgetting. She traced one with her finger, feeling warmth thread through her fingertips. The keeper watched her from the center of the room, his eyes steady and calm. "When a path is remembered, its light returns," he said softly. "That is the purpose of the lighthouse." Elara turned, her brow furrowed. "The light brings back what is forgotten?" she asked. The keeper nodded. "Not just places," he replied. "Memories, dreams, even souls lost to the mist. The light finds them." Elara stepped back, her gaze sweeping over the room. She saw pathways winding through forests of silver leaves, bridges that arched over rivers of light, and cities hidden beneath mist-covered mountains. Her heart quickened. "Can anyone remember them?" she asked. "Anyone who follows the light," the keeper replied. "All it takes is the choice to walk the path." His hand drifted to the edge of one map, his fingers brushing the corner where ink had faded. At his touch, the lines brightened, shimmering with faint light. Elara stepped closer, eyes wide. "Did you just?" she began, but he nodded gently. "When the light finds its way back, the path becomes clear once more." Elara stared at the glowing lines, her breath steady. For a moment, she thought she saw something move along the path, a flicker of light, like a lantern carried through fog. But when she blinked, it was gone, and the room settled back into shadow. The keeper moved gracefully to a wooden desk set against the far wall. Its surface was cluttered with scrolls and delicate glass bottles filled with swirling light. He sifted through the papers with practiced ease before producing a small iron key. Its surface was etched with spirals that shimmered faintly under the lantern's glow. "What is that?" Elara asked, stepping closer. The keeper held it out to her, his gaze steady. "It is the key to the next path," he replied. Elara hesitated before taking it, the metal cool and surprisingly heavy in her hand. The spirals carved into its surface seemed to shift slightly, as if alive beneath her touch. "Where does it lead?" she asked, her voice soft. The keeper turned back to the maps, his fingers trailing across the paths until they settled on one, narrow and winding, marked with symbols that glowed faintly under his touch. "There," he whispered. "The path of the silver branches." Elara leaned closer, her eyes tracing the trail as it wound through forests and along the edge of a river that shimmered with light. "I've never heard of it," she murmured. The keeper smiled gently. "Few have," he replied. "But it was once well-traveled. Now, only the light remembers it." Elara glanced down at the key in her hand, its spirals glimmering softly. She could feel its weight, like something waiting to be unlocked. "Will you come with me?" she asked, her gaze lifting back to the keeper. He shook his head slowly. "The path is yours to walk," he whispered. "But the light will guide you." Elara's heart fluttered, her fingers curling around the key. The path awaited her, stretching beyond the maps and into mist-covered shadows. She took a deep breath, feeling the light settle warmly in her palm. The journey had begun. Elara held the key tightly in her hand, its cool metal pulsing softly beneath her fingertips. The keeper stepped aside, his hand gesturing to a door at the far end of the room. Its surface was carved with spirals that matched the key's design, curling elegantly across the wooden panels. "The path awaits," he murmured, his voice soft as the wind through leaves. Without hesitation, Elara moved forward, her footsteps light against the stone floor. The door loomed before her, its surface glimmering faintly under the lantern's glow. She glanced back at the keeper, who nodded gently, his gaze steady and calm. Elara raised the key, fitting it into the lock. It turned with a whisper, and the door swung inward, revealing a corridor lined with silver branches. Mist drifted along the floor, curling around her ankles as she stepped inside. The branches arched overhead, their leaves shimmering softly with light. It was like stepping into a dream, soft, hushed, and endless. Elara walked carefully, her fingertips grazing the smooth bark as she moved deeper into the passage. The air smelled of rain and distant storms, fresh and cool against her skin. The light grew brighter as she walked, threading through the branches in delicate patterns. She paused beside one of the trees, her eyes tracing the spirals that wound along its trunk. Her fingers brushed the bark, and warmth pulsed gently beneath her touch. A whisper threaded through the air, soft and melodic, like the breath of wind through distant leaves. Elara listened, her heart quickening. It was not words, but something softer, like a memory stretching out from the edge of a dream. Elara continued down the path, her footsteps barely disturbing the mist that pooled along the ground. The silver branches swayed gently above her, their leaves rustling with whispers that danced just beyond hearing. She paused beneath one of the larger trees, its limbs stretching wide like open arms. She reached out, brushing her fingertips against the smooth bark. A ripple of light spread from her touch, winding up the trunk and spreading into the leaves. Elara gasped softly as the whispers grew clearer, threading through the air like fragments of half-remembered dreams. She leaned closer, her hand pressed firmly against the tree's surface. "Can you hear me?" she whispered, though she did not know why she spoke. For a moment, there was only silence, the leaves swaying softly above her. But then, a whisper curled through the branches, soft and distant, like the echo of a voice calling from across the sea. Elara's heart quickened, her fingers pressing deeper against the bark. The whisper grew clearer, spreading through the leaves, threads of light spiraling gently around her fingertips. Images flickered at the edges of her mind, a pathway winding through mist, lanterns flickering with soft light, and shadows stretching long across cobblestone streets. Elara closed her eyes, letting the whispers thread through her thoughts, pulling at memories she had long forgotten. When she opened her eyes, the light faded, slipping back into the branches, leaving only the soft glow of the path before her. Her breath came slow and steady, her heart beating with the rhythm of the whispers. She glanced back down the path she had walked, its entrance hidden now behind curls of silver mist. Ahead, the branches arched gracefully, their leaves flickering with light. Elara took a breath, steadying herself. The path called to her, whispering softly beneath the boughs. And she followed, her steps light, her heart steady, the key warm in her hand. The path wound deeper into the mist, the silver branches stretching above like arches in a forgotten cathedral. Their leaves shimmered softly with each whisper of wind, casting gentle patterns of light across the stone pathway. Elara moved carefully, the iron key still warm in her hand, its spirals pulsing faintly as she walked. Ahead, the fog grew thicker, curling in slow waves that drifted across the path. Elara paused, her breath steady, watching as the mist parted to reveal a stone pedestal resting beneath the boughs of a great tree. Upon it sat a lantern, its frame wrought from silver, its glass shimmering with soft light. Unlike the lighthouse's beam, this glow was gentle, flickering with hues of pale blue and gold. Elara stepped closer, her fingertips brushing the edge of the lantern. It was warm to the touch, thrumming softly beneath her hand. Symbols curled around its surface, the same spirals and crescents she had seen etched into the lighthouse door. Her heart quickened. "What is this?" she murmured, her breath fogging the glass. A whisper threaded through the mist, soft and distant. Elara turned, but there was only silence, the branches above swaying gently, their leaves catching flecks of light. She looked back to the lantern, its glow pulsing gently, casting long shadows that twisted across the ground. Slowly, she reached out, lifting it from the pedestal. The moment her hands closed around the handle, the light flared, spilling outward like ripples on water. Elara stumbled back, but the light held steady, shimmering with threads of silver that spiraled upward, threading through the branches. She watched in silence, breathless and still, as the path before her grew brighter, illuminated by strands of light that flickered and danced along the stones. The lantern hummed in her hands, its warmth spreading through her fingertips. Elara took a breath, steadying herself. The path was waiting. Elara held the lantern high, its light casting gentle beams that pierced the mist. The branches above shimmered with silver as she moved forward, her steps slow and measured. The path grew clearer with each step she took, winding through arches of stone and roots that stretched like grasping fingers. Shadows flickered along the edges of the light, retreating as the glow touched them. The mist thickened, swirling around her ankles as the path narrowed. Elara pressed on, the iron key still warm in her pocket, its weight a gentle reminder of the journey behind her. The whispers grew louder, threading through the leaves like distant voices, calling out names she could not understand. She paused, her breath catching as the light flared, casting long shadows that wavered and stretched. Ahead, the outline of a door emerged, tall and narrow, its surface etched with spirals that glimmered faintly beneath the lantern's glow. Elara stepped closer, her fingertips grazing the carvings. They were smooth and cool, pulsing gently beneath her touch. She glanced back down the path she had walked, the mist curling thick and heavy, hiding all that lay behind. The key thrummed softly in her pocket, urging her forward. Elara slipped it from her coat, its surface glimmering with faint light. She fitted into the lock, her heart steady, her breath calm. The door shivered under her touch, and with a whisper of stone, it swung inward, revealing a room bathed in soft light. Elara stepped inside, the lantern casting its glow across the stone floor. The whispers faded, replaced by a soft hum that vibrated through the walls. At the far end of the room stood the keeper, his hands folded gently before him, eyes glimmering like distant stars. He nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "You found the path," he whispered. Elara stepped forward, the lantern still warm in her hands. "I followed the light," she replied. The keeper's eyes softened, and he gestured to the center of the room, where a stone basin rested, filled with water that shimmered with silver light. "The paths are never truly lost," he murmured. "They wait, like stars beneath the surface, for those who remember to walk them once more." Elara stepped toward the stone basin, her footsteps soft against the smooth floor. The water shimmered with silver light, its surface perfectly still despite the faint whispers that threaded through the air. She knelt beside it, her eyes tracing the delicate ripples of light that spiraled outward in soft waves. The keeper stood silently behind her, his hands folded, his gaze steady. "What is this place?" Elara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The keeper stepped closer, his presence calm and unyielding. "This is the pool of reflections," he replied. "Here, the paths that were forgotten find their light again. Memories, wishes, lost moments, they are reflected here, waiting to be remembered." Elara stared into the water, watching as the surface flickered with threads of light. Shapes began to form, soft and distant, like shadows moving behind a curtain. She leaned closer, her breath misting above the water's surface. A pathway appeared, winding through a forest lit by lanterns that hung from branches heavy with silver leaves. Her heart quickened as she recognized it. "I know this place," she whispered, her fingertips grazing the water. The image rippled, and she saw herself as a child, running along the path, her hands brushing the low-hanging branches. Laughter drifted softly through the reflection, carried by the wind that rustled the leaves. Her breath caught as she watched the memory unfold, glowing softly beneath the surface. The keeper's hand rested gently on her shoulder. "Paths are never truly gone," he whispered. "They wait, hidden in the mist, until the light finds them again." Elara looked up, her eyes bright with understanding. "Can I go back?" she asked. The keeper inclined his head. "The light remembers," he said softly. "And so can you." Elara took a deep breath, her gaze locked on the shimmering pool. The path in the reflection glowed softly, stretching out into the mist, untouched by time. She glanced back at the keeper, who nodded gently, his eyes shimmering with distant light. "Step forward," he whispered. "The path is yours to walk once more." Without hesitation, Elara reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the water. The ripples spread outward, and the image wavered, growing brighter, sharper. She felt a pull, gentle and warm, as if threads of light were wrapping around her, drawing her forward. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth spread through her fingertips and up her arms, winding around her heart like the embrace of an old friend. When she opened her eyes, the lighthouse was gone. Mist curled around her feet, and the soft glow of lanterns shimmered above her, hanging from branches that stretched out like arches. She stood at the entrance of the path she had seen, a trail winding through the silver forest, just as it had been in her memory. Her breath came slow and steady, and she stepped forward, the ground soft beneath her feet. Behind her, the light of the lighthouse flickered gently, stretching out across the mist like a silver thread. The path opened before her, winding into shadows and light, its edges shimmering with threads of memory. Elara took a deep breath, her heart light, her steps unburdened. The path was hers to walk, its light stretching out into the distance, soft and eternal. And somewhere, high above the cliffs of Brackenport, the light of the lighthouse continued to turn, its beams sweeping across the fog, searching endlessly for the paths and memories that waited patiently to be found.